Okay, in this in in this elite presentation, I am going to be discussing specifically how autism has affected me. As you probably know, it does affect different individuals differently. So it does affect girls differently than boys. It does affect Americans different than Australians. But I want to share with you how it has affected me specifically. And that doesn't mean it's unique to me or anything. In grade school, I was oddly interested in worms. That means I mocked one or two students with the whole idea that they were worms. I rolled up a make-believe giant worm out of a quilt. I played with him a lot. I don't know why, but although not interested in a lot of animals, I was highly interested in worms. Another weirdness was pajamas at the dinner table. The whole family, even my own parents, thought it was weird how I always showed up for dinner in my pajamas. But the way I saw it, it was simply a relaxation habit. Everyone, I think, has their thing they do to relax, and in some lines of work, a very effective relaxation technique like meditation or yoga can be crucial, particularly for longshoremen, because they're under a very, very, very tight deadline. And speaking of deadlines, I have not been able to handle a very time-sensitive job myself. But I am capable of revolutionizing a few things, make no mistake about it. Mini reflections. The mini reflections were an experiment I actually once tried way back in elementary school. How it worked was I looked at myself in 2 mirrors at once, facing toward one another, effectively producing countless reflections of myself like I've illustrated here. And that was the only weirdness that my parents actually joked about, calling it my mini reflections, among other puns. Also, back in grade school, I had a lot less interest in team sports. Even though I was a Special Olympics winner, I literally won by inches. And I didn't see the sense in being on a team that played against other teams. Now, though, I have 8 favorite teams in the NFL, 12 favorite teams in the NBA, and 15 favorite teams in the NHL. But I really didn't see the appeal of team sports when I was in grade school, sadly. Exactly what changed all that was the Capital One Mascot Challenge before they discontinued it. I froze various things in cups. That was kind of a repetitive experiment. A few times it was pouring water on Beanie Babies before putting them in the freezer. In some cases, it was freezing random toys, often boring ones, in cups overnight in the freezer. Often various dollhouse items. And that could have been Barbies. But my mom thought Barbies were inappropriate. I was traumatized by Robin Hood. Some of you may have been traumatized by Pinocchio. Some of you may have been traumatized by The Black Cauldron or by A Brave Little Toaster. Or even by The Sword in the Stone. But the big Hollywood project that traumatized me was Robin Hood because of not only a dagger being pulled on Prince John, but because of Prince John tying a knot in Sir Hiss's neck, because of him sitting on Sir Hiss, because of him having so many innocent Nottingham residents imprisoned. That was the stuff of horror to me as a youngster. And I mean in elementary school, luckily. But even though Prince John traumatized me as a kid, I had an early taste for Disney and Pixar villains. Many animated villains, in fact, especially from Disney and Pixar. One of my big fascinations was with Sid Phillips, because Sid Phillips was the one who not only made Wild Behavior and Backyard Explosions funny, but he performed all kinds of ridiculous mutations on toys. Another fascinating villain to me was Honest John, because he was the one who made trickery an all-time classic charm when he targeted Pinocchio twice, to the point where he didn't listen to Jiminy Cricket. Then there are the amazing villains, like this guy who I have a picture with. He not only has a pilot's license, and he not only wears pants, but he faces off against several guys who don't. That's exactly what can make a cartoon villain amazing. That's why both Space Jam movies were so good, when Looney Tune heroes and villains had to work together to defeat a higher power. Another thing is, handwriting was and still is heavy grunt work. It's only a matter of time before pencils become obsolete, like I've mentioned in this special art piece. Handwriting is sloppy among us because it's very, very heavy grunt work. That's exactly why everyone needs to learn how to type, not just on a laptop, but also on a smartphone. That's also why everyone should work on typing speed and typing accuracy. And exactly how it went down for me so well was when I wrote my first novel. And it also improved when I wrote 4 separate works of fan fiction featuring Don Carnage, but only one features Baloo. Only one of those 4 does. But that's another story. In high school, I was not one to take one for the team. That means we were required to do just a couple of different sports in PE, sometimes volleyball, sometimes kickball. And I got very, very irritated when a teammate launched a foul ball. And again, it was irritating because I didn't want to be on that whole team in the first place. Really didn't. Another very sad thing for me as a teenager was I disliked formal events. Whether it was a grim occasion or a happy occasion, I did not look forward to going to formal events because of the dress code. I always wanted to dress casually whenever possible. Always, always, always. Like always in a t-shirt, always in either shorts or sweatpants, and usually barefoot. And sadly, that was because high standards were an issue unless it was part of a bargain that I had made consensually, like with paid opportunities. One good thing, though, was I excelled in a few things. I excelled in English to the point where I pointed out where a semicolon should be when called on one such group assignment. I pointed out where a semicolon should be in a sabotaged sentence. Then there's geography. I was so good at world geography because every time I heard of a significant country, I wanted to know where it was on the globe, where it really was on the globe, like Japan. In fact, at one point in geography, we all got the assignment to choose a country to do a report on, and the popular choice was the United States. But I actually had the sense to go for Japan. Then there's science. I was very good at science, thanks in part to Bill Nye the Science Guy. Then, most of all, there was driver's ed. I not only had a good driver's ed teacher who made it clear what would happen if one of us drove drunk, but he could clearly tell whether or not a student was really focusing. And thanks in part to all that, I had no trouble at all getting my license. No trouble whatsoever. I passed the written test first time through and passed the road test first time through. That's important. I also had a lot of trouble in certain things, as you can imagine, algebra and other high-level math. I think that was because it was so complicated to memorize all those steps in solving such advanced equations and expressions. Then there was journalism. I was not interested in the journalism class that I wound up in because I did not want to be filmed or photographed at the time. Also, journalists are highly judgeable to me by their respect for privacy. Then there's anatomy and physiology. And that was where I really didn't understand the material, other than the basics of the digestive system. I also had a much worse attitude towards volunteer work. I think volunteer work would be the easiest way to land a skilled 9-to-5 job in most cases, but I had a much worse attitude towards working for free. Case in point, I've always looked down upon Red Cross because when they donate blood to a drunk driver, that really doesn't sit well with me. And drunk driving hits so close to home for me as a gearhead. But needless to say, when they donate blood to those who have lost blood in very dangerous lines of work, that's a much, much more noble cause. Much more noble cause, whether it be search and rescue, whether it be trucking, or whether it be acrobatics. Then there's early adulthood. In early adulthood, I have acquired a much, much greater taste for team sports, except for baseball. Like I said, I have 8 favorite teams in the NFL, 12 favorite teams in the NBA, and up to 15 favorite teams in the NHL. Plus plenty of favorites in college sports. My favorite red team in college sports is Arkansas State. My favorite blue team in college sports is UCLA. My favorite red team in the NFL is the Atlanta Falcons. My favorite blue team in the NFL is the Tennessee Titans. When we add up all of my favorite professional leagues combined, 15 plus 12 equals 27, plus 8 equals 35. Not counting Major League Soccer, I have 35 favorite teams in professional sports. And they all have one crucial thing in common. All their mascots wear pants. All 35 of those mascots wear the right attire, regardless of species. That means even though I despise the Carolina Panthers, I still love the Florida Panthers. I've also been bigger on judicial politics than presidential politics or state politics. And that means I have very strong opinions about what a defendant would face once found guilty of a certain crime, including identity theft, drunk driving, kidnapping, the list goes on. I won't go into detail about all that because that's where people get emotional. But kidnapping hits home for me, at least when the victim is under 18, because they are the ones who can't fight back. Now, to sum it all up, autism is a very common disability these days, but not the hardest to live with by any means. Even though it limits what you can do full time, it's not the hardest disability to live with by any means. And there's something else important. It always takes autistic genes to invent, design, and compose new things. That's why I'm touching here on Filippo Perini, the designer of the Lamborghini Aventador. That's why I say he's articulate. That means it takes autistic genes like his to design a car. That's exactly why people with autism actually need to learn how to drive, not to mention the advantage in terms of employment. Whether it be as simple as a slinky or yo-yo, whether it be as complicated as the Golden Gate Bridge, or the stadium, or the Grand Coulee Dam. It always takes autistic genes to dream it up and design it. Always. Madam Toastmaster.